In the Drippy Cat Art Studio, I've given you a wide variety of brushes, and these are all the different categories, and they cover a lot of ground. However, what you are likely to find as you develop as an artist is that you start to rely on a very small selection of brushes to do your general artwork. Don't get me wrong, it is very useful to have a series of watercolour brushes or a series of textures or a series of dots, for example. And you know they're there, you have an idea about how to use them, that is great. But I cannot tell you how useful it is going to be for you to have just a small handful or even just a couple or even just one brush that you know inside out. You know exactly what it's going to do, how it will behave when it's big or small or semi-transparent, or you're using it to smudge areas with. When you get a brush like that, it feels like the brush is just getting out of the way and letting you get on with the artwork. Now for me, this is in the first brush set in the General tab, and it's DC Nice Buildup. Now let me show you this. I'll come to my layers. You can see I have my blocked in layer. We spoke about that in another video. I have my draw here layer, which is clipped to the blocked in layer, and we spoke about that in another video. And I have my sketch layer with my sketch, plus my palettes with all my colors, plus any information about what brushes I have used. In this case, the outline DC Sketcher to create the sketch, plus how big it was and how opaque it was, along with a little sample swatch. So if I want to come in and edit that sketch, I know exactly what tools and what color to use. But what I will do is I will create a new layer. I will just make the other layers invisible for a second. My DC Nice Buildup brush is chosen. It's on halfway transparent and it is 12% big. And there we go. Let's choose a couple of other colors. And now I'm just varying the pressure. I will make it bigger. Pressing harder, pressing softer, choose another color again, lay that on top of it. Choose other colors. And right now, I'm not really thinking very much. I'm not thinking, this brush is giving me a nice effect. I must remember this one, maybe stick it in my favorites folder. Well, no, I'm not, because I use this brush a lot. In fact, I use this as my default brush. So I know how it works. If I put the opacity right the way up, I can quickly block in areas. If I take the opacity way, way down, and let's choose a lighter color on top, I know I can gradually build up lighter areas like this. And I know if I press hard with this brush, I'm still going to get a solid area of color because I know it. If I come to my smudges, I've got the same brush chosen. And I know that if I set the opacity low and start dragging stuff around and don't press too hard, I'm going to get this amount of smudging. If I go along a line, a border between the light and the dark, I'm going to get a nice soft border as well. I know if I crank up the opacity of the smudger so it's on 100%, I know I'm going to get much more drag. This is predictable for me. When I'm doing this, I don't want to be amazed and delighted and surprised by what the brush is giving me. I want to know exactly what it's doing. Now I do have variations. I've got DC Nice Buildup. Nice Buildup Hard is basically the same brush but with a hard edge. And I know that looks very functional, let's put it that way. But I know some very successful artists who basically use a brush like this, then they default to smudging. And they can create incredible bits of art just by using a hard edge brush and a smudger and an eraser. I have DC Nice Buildup Square. And you can see basically it's a square-ish brush. Now when you get a squarish brush like this and you're using an Apple Pencil Pro, if you're lucky enough to own one, I've set up the square brushes in this collection of brushes to use barrel roll. So I'm twisting my pencil around now and you can see the head of my brush is rotating along with it. I have Nice Buildup Taper. Again, very similar, but if I press soft, I get a thin line. If I press hard, I get a thicker line. Apart from that, the properties are the same as all the other build-up brushes. Nice Buildup Taper Soft, again, very similar. but it's got a soft edge to it. And just knowing these brushes and knowing exactly how they work and what the variations are means I can concentrate on the painting rather than exploring brushes. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, exploring brushes is a good idea, obviously, but there are times you just want to get on. Okay, so my draw here layer is active. It is clipped to my blocked in layer. I will come to my nice build-up brush and I'm going to work at a breakneck speed here, much faster than I would work usually, but I just want to show you this in action. So let's come to our squirrel. I'll crank up the opacity up to 100% because I want to lay down fairly blocky areas of color. I'm going to start in the darker areas first. Now, because Sid the squirrel was blocked in using DC Line Blocker Inner and DC Hard Blocker Inner, we covered that in a previous video, I can very quickly put down brush strokes. And I'm being pretty bold with this. What I want to do is basically cover all the blue areas. That way I know I've got a consistent base coat there. In fact, come on, I'm still dabbing in areas. There's no reason at all why I can't do just huge brush strokes like this. And I'm also making things fairly dark. Normally, when you do something like this, put all your blocked in colors first. And the fact that the blocked in layer is blue means that I can see very clearly where I'm putting in these different areas, and I'm keeping my brush very big. I don't want to be scribbling in areas, not for now, because remember, this brush is opaque. I can paint over areas really, really quickly. Make it a little bit smaller because I want a bit more control around here, but also I need a darker area around here. Let's put in a little bit more of the fur. Just start putting some slightly lighter areas like this. And that looks pretty much covered. Now I'm going to take my opacity down to say 50%, make my brush size a little bit smaller. In fact, no, I want to take my opacity down to, where am I? 15%. And I'll choose some lighter areas and I'll choose 12% for now, but I'm just making some slightly lighter brush strokes just around the head area. I'm varying the pressure because yes, I can, and I can control this quite nicely. Maybe choose some of that very light color just around here, around here. I'm going to choose some of that black, make my brush size a little bit bigger and just gradually dial in some darker bits around the tail and maybe up the opacity and just soften this very dark bit here, for example. I'm explaining to you what brush settings I'm using, but when I'm working, this is just automatic. I know that I'm going to need a certain brush setting at a certain size to control the effect I've got. I very quickly build up my base coat like this. Oh, and a little bit of light around here. Have a quick scribble. Make my brush a little bit larger. Add some around the chest area, maybe just around the tummy area, a little bit along here, maybe a little bit down here. Now, let's come to my DC Nice Buildup. In my smudges, my opacity, or how much it's going to smudge, is about halfway. Where's my brush size? Let's try about, say, 11%, and I can start to push and pull these different color areas into some different shapes, forms, and refine things a little bit more. So I can start to blend the colours in with each other a little bit more, refine. Oh yeah, especially around here. Let's blend these in. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take up the opacity so it's going to be a lot stronger, and I'm going to take down the actual size to what, 4%? Let's zoom in, just say on this area here. I'm in the forehead area, and I'm starting to smear backwards and forwards, and I'm starting to get a little bit of a fur effect. In fact, you know what? Let's take the size down to what, 1 or 2%. I'm getting a very fine area here, and I can start to create the effect of fur just by scribbling in certain directions, and I can work quite fast with this because I've done this I don't know how many times before. I know how the brush works, and so rather than wondering, what brush shall I use, or I need a fur brush, you do have fur brushes here, but the whole point is I now can do it this way. So rather than playing hunt the brush, it's all right here just waiting for me. In fact, maybe come to the variation. Let's try Nice Buildup Taper. Again, crank up the size, but very nice and small. And because I've got a tapered edge, that might affect the look of it. Let's crank that up a little bit, say 4%. And I'm getting a slightly thicker effect there in certain areas. Let's come to the tail. And then if I decide I want to vary that a little bit, just take it down by 1%, and I'm getting a thinner smudge effect. And so I'm getting kind of a matted effect where it's not all the same fine fur, the same silky effect. I'm getting these kind of variations. Slightly more of a wilder, slightly more of a matted effect. And you can see how quickly I can do this because I'm making confident brush strokes. Confident brush strokes are always going to help you. And one of the reasons I can make these confident brush strokes is that I know what this brush is going to do. There you go. That tail just a short while ago was kind of a sea of colours. Quite nice colours, but still just a sea of colours. Now I'm very quickly building up this fur effect simply by smudging with a brush I'm familiar with. So hopefully the take you get from this is, yes, it is great having a selection of brushes, but I recommend, especially if you've just bought a brush set like this, yeah, a quick overview of what the brushes can do, that is very useful, but when you actually want to start creating something, it is well worth your time getting to know just one or two general purpose brushes. And depending upon the brush you settle on, that is going to go some way towards defining your style as an artist. And that can never be a bad thing. Okay, let's wrap up this video.